Most people do not fail because they lack intelligence, opportunity, or effort. They fail because their attention is scattered. They wake up each day with good intentions, yet by nightfall feel strangely exhausted without having moved meaningfully forward. Their days are full, but their progress is shallow. This book begins with a hard truth. Being busy is not the same as doing what matters, and confusion between the two quietly wastes years of life. The author opens by addressing a modern problem that feels normal only because it is universal: constant distraction. Notifications, emails, social media, endless information, and the pressure to respond immediately create the illusion of productivity. People feel occupied every moment, yet struggle to point to work that truly mattered. The mind jumps from task to task, never staying long enough to create depth. Focus erodes not because people are careless, but because distraction has been normalized. The book argues that attention is your most valuable resource. Time passes regardless of how it is used, but attention determines what that time produces. When attention is divided, outcomes are diluted. The author emphasizes that most people spend their days reacting rather than choosing. They respond to messages, requests, and demands from others while postponing the work that actually aligns with their goals. Over time, this reactive lifestyle becomes a habit. A central idea introduced early is that clarity precedes focus. People struggle to focus not because they are weak, but because they are unclear. When priorities are vague, everything feels equally important. When everything feels important, attention fragments. The mind becomes overwhelmed by choice. Focus, then, is not about concentration techniques. It is about deciding what deserves your energy and what does not. The author explains that modern productivity culture often makes this problem worse. Lists grow longer, systems become more complex, tools multiply. Instead of simplifying, people add more structure to manage chaos. But complexity does not create focus. It often hides avoidance. The book stresses that productivity should reduce mental load, not increase it. If a system demands constant maintenance, it becomes another distraction. Another misconception addressed is the belief that multitasking is efficient. Switching rapidly between tasks feels productive, but it fractures attention and increases cognitive fatigue. Each switch carries a cost. The mind needs time to reorient, and frequent switching prevents deep work. Over time, this trains the brain to crave novelty and resist sustained effort. Focus weakens not because tasks are hard, but because the mind has been conditioned to escape difficulty. The author introduces the idea that focus requires intentional subtraction. Instead of asking what more you can do, you must ask what you can stop doing. Many commitments exist not because they matter, but because they were never questioned. Saying yes becomes automatic. Focus requires the courage to say no to tasks, requests, and expectations that do not align with what truly matters. The book also highlights the emotional side of distraction. Distraction is often a form of avoidance. Difficult tasks create discomfort, uncertainty, or fear of failure. Distraction offers immediate relief. Checking a phone, answering a message, or switching tasks feels productive while avoiding discomfort. Focus requires learning to sit with discomfort long enough to move through it. Another key theme is the false belief that you will focus later. People postpone meaningful work, telling themselves they will address it once things calm down. But things rarely calm down on their own. Without deliberate boundaries, noise increases. The author emphasizes that focus must be claimed, not waited for. If you do not protect your attention, others will consume it. The book reframes focus as an act of responsibility. Your attention shapes your life. What you repeatedly focus on determines what grows. When attention is spent on trivial matters, life feels shallow. When attention is invested in meaningful work, progress compounds. This is not about perfection or constant concentration. It is about direction. The author also explains that clarity about values is essential. Focus is unsustainable without meaning. When work feels disconnected from values, resistance increases. The mind looks for escape. When work aligns with what matters, effort feels purposeful. This alignment reduces internal conflict and strengthens commitment. Toward the end of this part, the author challenges the reader to confront an uncomfortable question. If you continue to live reactively, responding to everything except what matters most, where will you end up? Busyness creates motion without direction. Focus creates direction without excess motion. The difference is subtle in the short term and dramatic over time. The first part concludes with a grounding realization. Focus is not about controlling your mind through force. It is about choosing what deserves your attention and removing what does not. Until that choice is made deliberately, distraction will always feel stronger than intention. Focus begins not with doing more, but with deciding what truly matters and committing to protect it. Part 2. Clarity, prioritization, and learning to say no without guilt. Once the cost of distraction becomes clear, the next challenge emerges, choosing what actually matters. This is far more difficult than it sounds. Most people do not lack options, they suffer from excess. Too many goals, too many commitments, too many expectations compete for limited attention. The mind becomes crowded, and when everything feels important, nothing receives the depth it deserves. The book emphasizes that focus is impossible without clarity, and clarity begins with deliberate choice. The author explains that people often confuse priorities with preferences. Preferences shift with mood and convenience. Priorities are stable. They reflect values rather than impulses. Without clearly defined priorities, attention defaults to whatever is loudest or most urgent. Emails feel important because they demand response. Requests feel important because they come from others. Meaningful work, which rarely demands immediate attention, is pushed aside. A critical idea introduced in this part is that urgency is not the same as importance. Many tasks feel urgent because they involve deadlines or external pressure. Important work, however, often has no deadline. It relates to long-term goals, personal growth, or meaningful contribution. The author argues that if you do not schedule what is important, it will always lose to what is urgent. Clarity requires deciding in advance what deserves focus. This decision cannot be made in the middle of chaos. It must be made intentionally during moments of reflection. The author encourages defining a small number of core priorities rather than maintaining an endless list of goals. When priorities are limited, focus strengthens because the mind knows where to direct energy. The book also addresses the fear associated with choosing priorities. Every choice excludes something else. Saying yes to one path means saying no to another. Many people avoid clarity because they fear regret. They want to keep options open, but keeping options open indefinitely creates stagnation. Progress requires commitment, and commitment requires exclusion. Learning to say no is a central theme in this section. The author explains that saying no is not selfish, it is responsible. When you say yes to everything, you dilute your effort and disappoint yourself. Saying no protects the quality of your yes. Focus improves when boundaries are clear, not when availability is unlimited. Guilt often prevents people from setting boundaries. They fear disappointing others or appearing uncooperative. The book reframes guilt as misplaced responsibility. You are responsible for your actions, not for managing everyone else's expectations. When you prioritize what matters, some people may be inconvenienced. This discomfort is temporary. The cost of perpetual distraction is permanent. Another important idea is that priorities must be realistic. Many people overload themselves with ideals that do not fit their current life stage. Focus improves when goals align with available time, energy, and circumstances. Discipline without realism leads to burnout. Clarity requires honesty about limits. The author also explains that focus improves when decisions are simplified. When you know your priorities, many decisions disappear automatically. You no longer debate whether to accept every request. You evaluate it against your priorities. This reduces mental fatigue and emotional stress. The book highlights that saying no becomes easier with practice. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Over time, it feels natural. Each boundary reinforces self-respect. Focus strengthens as you experience the benefits of protected time and deeper engagement. Another subtle theme in this section is internal distraction. Even without external interruptions, many people struggle because their minds are cluttered with unresolved commitments. The author emphasizes the importance of closing loops. Unfinished tasks consume mental energy. Clear priorities allow you to either complete or consciously defer tasks, freeing attention. The book also addresses perfectionism as a barrier to clarity. People delay choosing priorities because they want certainty, but clarity does not require perfect foresight. It requires direction. You can adjust later. Waiting for perfect clarity leads to inaction. Toward the end of this part, the author emphasizes that focus is not about rigid control. It is about alignment. When priorities reflect what you truly value, effort feels meaningful. Resistance decreases. Focus becomes sustainable because it is anchored in purpose rather than pressure. The section concludes with a powerful realization. Focus is not something you find. It is something you declare. When you decide what matters and commit to protecting it, attention follows. Without that declaration, distraction will always feel justified. Part 3. Deep Work, Attention Management, and Building a Life Around Focus. Once priorities are clear, the question shifts from what matters to how you give it your full attention. This is where most people stumble. They know what is important, yet still struggle to stay with it long enough to produce meaningful results. The author explains that focus is not a personality trait. It is a skill shaped by environment, habits, and intentional structure. Without deliberate design, attention will always drift toward what is easiest, loudest, or most immediately rewarding. The book introduces the idea of deep work as the natural state of focused attention applied to meaningful tasks. Deep work is not about working longer hours or pushing harder. It is about working with presence. When attention is uninterrupted, progress accelerates. Tasks that feel overwhelming in fragments become manageable when approached with sustained focus. The difficulty lies not in the work itself, but in resisting the pull of distraction long enough to enter this state. The author explains that shallow work dominates most modern schedules. Meetings, emails, messages, updates, and administrative tasks create the appearance of productivity while rarely producing lasting value. Shallow work is not useless, but it must be contained. When it expands unchecked, it crowds out deep work. Focus improves when shallow work is intentionally limited and deep work is protected. A key obstacle to deep focus is the constant availability expected in modern life. People feel pressured to respond immediately, even when the response adds little value. The book challenges this norm. Being constantly reachable does not make you effective, it makes you reactive. Deep focus requires periods of intentional unavailability. This is not neglect, it is prioritization. The author emphasizes that attention must be scheduled, not improvised. Waiting for free time rarely works because free time is quickly filled. Deep focus must be treated as a non-negotiable appointment. When focus is placed on the calendar, it becomes real. Without this structure, intention remains abstract. Another important idea explored is the role of rituals. Rituals reduce the mental effort required to start focused work. When the same cues precede the same type of work, the mind learns to transition more smoothly. Rituals might involve time, location, or specific preparatory actions. Their purpose is not rigidity, but reliability. Focus strengthens when starting becomes automatic. The book also addresses the discomfort associated with sustained attention. Focus requires staying with difficulty rather than escaping it. The mind naturally seeks relief when effort increases. Distraction offers that relief instantly. The author explains that the ability to focus is directly related to the ability to tolerate boredom. When you train yourself to sit with discomfort without reaching for stimulation, attention deepens. Another significant theme is the importance of finishing meaningful work. Many people start focused sessions but abandon them prematurely when progress slows. The author emphasizes that breakthroughs often occur after the initial resistance passes. Focus rewards patience. Leaving too early trains the mind to associate difficulty with escape. Staying reinforces resilience. The book also highlights the role of technology. Tools are not neutral, they shape behavior. While technology can support focus, it often undermines it when used without intention. The author encourages conscious boundaries around digital tools. This includes limiting notifications, batching communication, and reducing unnecessary consumption. Attention improves when technology serves priorities instead of dictating them. The author introduces the idea that focus is cumulative. Each focused session strengthens the ability to focus again. Distraction works the same way. The more frequently attention is fragmented, the harder it becomes to sustain depth. Focus is not rebuilt through sudden effort but through repeated practice. Small, consistent sessions create lasting change. Another subtle point explored is the emotional satisfaction of deep work. While shallow tasks provide quick dopamine, they leave little sense of accomplishment. Deep work, though initially demanding, produces lasting satisfaction. This satisfaction reinforces the habit. Over time, the mind begins to prefer depth over novelty. The book also addresses interruptions from others. While some interruptions are unavoidable, many persist because boundaries are unclear. The author emphasizes communicating availability intentionally. When others know when you are accessible and when you are not, interruptions decrease. Focus improves when expectations are explicit. The author explains that focus also requires recovery. Deep work is cognitively demanding. Without rest, attention degrades. Breaks are not distractions, they are part of the system. Intentional rest restores focus. The book encourages alternating periods of deep work with genuine rest rather than constant low-level activity. Another important idea is that focus improves when work is meaningful. Tasks that align with values naturally command attention. When work feels empty or misaligned, distraction increases. This is not a discipline problem, it is a clarity problem. Focus thrives where meaning exists. The book also discusses the danger of overloading days with too many focused sessions. Focus is finite. Attempting to do deep work all day leads to diminishing returns. Sustainable focus respects limits. Fewer high-quality sessions outperform many distracted hours. Toward the end of this part, the author reframes attention as a reflection of respect. What you focus on reveals what you value. When you give shallow attention to meaningful work, you undermine its importance. When you give full attention, you honor it. Focus becomes an ethical choice, not just a productivity strategy. The section closes with a clear understanding. Focus is not about isolating yourself from the world. It is about engaging with the right things fully. When attention is managed intentionally, work deepens, stress decreases, and progress becomes visible. Focus stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like alignment. Part 4. Living with intention, sustaining focus, and a life centered on what truly matters. Final. As focus becomes a habit rather than an effort, life begins to feel different in subtle but meaningful ways. Days no longer blur together in a haze of constant activity. Work feels more deliberate. Time feels less scarce. This final part of the book shifts from technique to lifestyle, emphasizing that focus is not something you switch on for work and abandon elsewhere. It is a way of living, an ongoing commitment to directing attention toward what truly matters and away from what merely demands it. The author explains that intention is the foundation of sustained focus. Without intention, focus eventually collapses under the weight of convenience. Intention answers a simple but powerful question: why does this deserve my attention? When that question is answered honestly, discipline follows naturally. Focus becomes easier not because life is quieter, but because decisions are clearer. One of the most important ideas in this section is that focus must be renewed regularly. Life changes, responsibilities shift. What mattered last year may not matter now. Sustaining focus requires periodic reflection. The author encourages stepping back to reassess priorities, not out of restlessness but out of alignment. Reflection prevents drift. Without it, attention slowly returns to reactive patterns. The book also emphasizes that focus is fragile without boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They protect attention from being consumed by every request, notification, or opportunity. Sustaining focus means deciding in advance what will not receive attention. This includes unnecessary commitments, habitual distractions, and goals that no longer align with values. Another theme explored is the relationship between focus and peace of mind. When attention is scattered, anxiety increases. Unfinished tasks accumulate. Mental clutter grows. Focus reduces anxiety by creating closure. When you give full attention to fewer things, you complete more. Completion quiets the mind. Peace emerges not from doing everything, but from doing the right things well. The author also discusses the emotional maturity required to sustain focus. Distraction often returns during periods of uncertainty, self-doubt, or discomfort. Focus requires learning to sit with unresolved questions without escaping into noise. This tolerance for uncertainty strengthens over time. Focus becomes a stabilizing force rather than a coping mechanism. A critical idea in this final part is that focus is not about control, but about choice. You cannot control everything that enters your life. You can choose what you engage with deeply. This choice restores agency. Instead of feeling pulled in every direction, you move deliberately. Life feels less reactive and more intentional. The book also addresses the fear of missing out, which undermines focus in subtle ways. When you limit attention, you inevitably miss things. The author reframes this as a feature, not a flaw. Missing out on what does not matter creates space for what does. Focus requires trusting that depth is more valuable than breadth. Another important point is that focus extends beyond work. Relationships, health, and personal growth all benefit from intentional attention. Being present with people strengthens connection. Being focused during rest improves recovery. A focused life is not narrow. It is rich because attention is invested fully rather than spread thin. The author emphasizes that sustaining focus requires compassion toward yourself. There will be periods of distraction. Old habits will resurface. This does not mean failure. It means recalibration is needed. Focus is not a rigid state. It is a practice. Returning gently to what matters is more effective than self-criticism. The book also highlights that focus simplifies identity. When you know what matters, you stop defining yourself by productivity or busyness. You begin to define yourself by intention and follow-through. This shift reduces comparison and external pressure. Your standards become internal. Another subtle insight is that focus creates momentum. When attention is aligned consistently, progress compounds. Small efforts accumulate. Confidence grows quietly. This momentum reinforces itself, making focus easier to maintain over time. The author explains that focus also protects against burnout. Burnout often results from expending energy on work that feels meaningless or endless. Focus limits effort to what matters, allowing rest to be truly restorative. When work is intentional, rest feels earned rather than guilty. Toward the end of the book, the author reframes success. Success is not measured by how much you do, but by how well you direct your attention. A focused life may look simpler from the outside, but it feels fuller from within. Meaning replaces noise. Direction replaces overwhelm. The final message of the book is calm and grounding. Focus is not about becoming rigid or isolated. It is about honoring your limited attention and investing it wisely. Life does not require constant optimization. It requires presence. When you focus on what matters, the rest falls into place naturally. The book closes with a reminder that attention is always being spent, whether intentionally or not. The choice is not whether you will focus, but on what. When that choice is made consciously, life begins to reflect clarity, purpose, and quiet progress. Focus becomes less of a struggle and more of a way of being, a steady alignment between attention and what truly matters.